How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and as always, I'm beyond excited to break down the latest news of Mets land because we're breaking down a player that the Mets are now connected to that I connected the Mets with going back a month and a half plus ago in our latest trade targets video, and that is, yes, Luis Castillo from the Seattle Mariners is officially among players that the Mets are targeting for their rotation for 2025. In today's show, we're going to further highlight where this report comes from. Ultimately, what are the other teams actively involved in Castillo's market? What's there to know about Luis Castillo in his game? Why does David Stearns like the idea of landing him for the rotation? What is it going to take to land someone of his caliber? And everything in between is what we're going to highlight. So let me see those initial reactions in the comments down below, everybody. Thank you so much for smashing that like and subscribe button as you chime in. And also thank you so much for hearing from our amazing sponsor at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Folks, head over to betus.com.pa today if you haven't already. That way you too can use Wardy's promo code YouTube150, and that way you get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, a $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000. And it's NFL Sunday, so naturally we're going to be hammering some football picks. My Pittsburgh Steelers there at plus 5.5, meaning that they have to make sure that they do not lose by more than 5.5 points or they win outright. I have that pair there with the Chargers money line right around minus 150. So this is a $20 parlay that's going to win me a grand total of around $63 should both teams win and hit in their parlays, or at least in the Steelers case, not necessarily needing to win, but making sure that they hit there at plus 5.5. Feel free to tail these bets in the games if the games haven't started already by the time you're watching this. Please know I am a diehard sports fan, but I am not a sports betting expert. That I like to clarify. These are just my respective picks from one fan to another, so bet responsibly, but do it here with our amazing friends at BetUS. But as we hop back into this one, everybody, this was first broke from Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic last night, and the only reason why I didn't jump to do a video on it right away is truthfully I wanted the algorithm to still go well with our Alex Bregman video from yesterday, which the Mets are targeting as well, so check that out in case you guys haven't already. Fast forward a day later, no other news has really happened at this point, so let's deep dive and break down Luis Castillo that I'm really excited to do exactly that about, because as many of you have already seen on the platform, again, we are not foreign to talking about Luis Castillo on the channel. This is a guy that we actually highlighted on the platform, again, at least a month ago, if not longer, as you guys can see initially from our 5 Mets trade targets video, again, going back a little bit of a month or so ago there at north of 10,000 views. And in said video, I highlighted Luis Castillo as my number 2 trade target out of the top 5 that I had for the Mets at the time. Fast forward a month plus later, and nothing has really wavered. If anything, I definitely want Luis Castillo on this Mets team, and for great reason. And as Ken Rosenthal highlights in his article last night, the Mets are one of multiple teams that are actively pursuing him. They are joined there with the Chicago Cubs, the Boston Red Sox. We have also seen other teams there in that mix, like the Baltimore Orioles, amongst some others. So the Mets are still in that core 3 or core 4 of reported teams there actively pursuing Luis Castillo. So let's deep dive now all the pros and the cons of someone Luis Castillo and his game, because a starter like him would do wonders for this Mets rotation. There's no denying that whatsoever. The Mets are looking for a starter that, again, at times fits the short and long-term bill, or maybe just fits the short-term bill without actually being a rental. In the case of Framber Valdez that we broke down yesterday, a very appealing option for the Mets rotation, but I can see why the Mets will not land him, because he's a rental, so why give up key prospects for a guy that might not be here a year from now? I understand that. In the case of Castillo, however, there are more reasons to be optimistic, and there are honestly a lot more reasons to be like, okay, this guy makes a lot of sense for the Mets here, and we're going to deep dive them right here, right now. Let's start with Castillo and his current contract status. He is on a $75 million deal over the course of the next 3 years for Castillo. What does that entail? Simply what it means is he's making right around $25 million average annual value over the next 3 years. Now, Castillo has been an absolute workhorse during his many years in the Cincinnati Reds organization, where I wanted him then with that absolutely devastating changeup that was his premier pitch. He goes to Seattle, completely changes the arsenal. That changeup that was amongst the best in Major League Baseball is now the pitch he uses the least. That four-seam fastball that's oh so deadly there, sitting in the mid to high 90s, consistently still on the gun. Then you, of course, have the sinker, you got the slide piece, and then the changeup there in the back pocket as your fourth and final pitch. Luis Castillo has been doing dominant things there as a veteran starter in Major League Baseball from the Reds, then to be traded that we saw the Seattle Mariners over the past couple years. And why is he appealing to David Stearns and the Mets? Because again, at 3 years, $75 million total, yes, there is a fourth-year option that he can essentially try to make sure that he has guaranteed if he is traded, because he has a very strict trade list as well, where he will dictate where he will be dealt. This is not a situation where he does not at all have any say in where he will be traded. He does have a trade clause, so bear that in mind with Castillo. I'm sure he'd like to be, New York Met with everything trending upward here, and obviously a lot of fellow players of Dominican descent, as is the case in Luis Castillo himself, that I further want to highlight. The Mets were to go in and add a guy in Luis Castillo. This would further build the clubhouse culture of guys of, same descents, and that's never a bad thing because, again, there are little things that go a long way when you have more of a comfortability. I think that went in hand with Juan Soto coming to the Mets along with $805 million, essentially, because of the fact that, again, you can be more of your personal self. You can express your personality more as a Met versus, say, the Yankee way. And also, when it looks at Spanish culture, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, whatever they may be, the Mets are very welcoming with that, and we have a great fan base that certainly has a lot of supporters from these respective countries. In the case of especially Dominican players as well, Castillo coming in the reins of the Mets here would be appealing because he would join not only Juan Soto, but also Frankie Montas, who hilariously enough was the fallback option for the New York Yankees a couple years ago around the trade deadline when they couldn't land Luis Castillo. That's who they wanted from the Reds more than anybody. They tried hard to land him. They wouldn't give up the necessary prospects to land him. Castillo gets an absolute haul there, sent to the Reds there at the time, prospect-wise. So they opted with Frankie Montas. Montas never does anything good in New York. And now we're looking at the potential of both Frankie Montas and Luis Castillo pairing together in this Mets rotation. I'm sure Yankees fans have their respective notes and things to say about that. But a fellow countryman there in Frankie Montas. Then you add in Jose Siri, another newcomer. You add in the veteran who could be traded this offseason in Starling Marte, Huascar Brosman, who the Mets acquired at the trade deadline last year there from the Miami Marlins. Daniel Nunez, remember him, obviously, an absolutely dynamic flamethrowing reliever. Our little Edwin Diaz 2.0, as I like to call him, with that fastball slider 1-2 punch there to help set up Edwin Diaz up until his injury. And Ronnie Mauricio, can't forget Ronnie. He's back in baseball activities. If he impacts the Mets at all next season, that'll be an awesome thing. But Castillo is rightfully awesome, and he is a huge trade commodity, a target rather, for a lot of teams in Major League Baseball. And when you look at how inflated this pitching market is, with a guy Luis Castillo already getting what? We saw there over 22 mil AAV over the next number of years with the Sacramento A's. Luis Castillo is coming out of bargain, you could rightfully argue right now. The same exact contract for the most part as Nathan Eovaldi, who just re-signed with Texas at 3 years, $75 million. Castillo this past season posted a 3.64 ERA, a 3.94 expected ERA. When we look at the K per 9, there to walks per 9, his K per 9 did drop by a full strikeout this past year. He's usually around a 10 K per 9 pitcher, but this past season he was right around a 9 K per 9 pitcher to still sitting sub 3 in the walks per 9, 2 point something to be exact. So he has had a very strong K to walk ratio throughout his career. Castillo's arsenal has changed over the past couple of years, which is why I'd be enticed on how he would fare in this Mets, in this Mets organization, along with Jeremy Hefner, Desi Druskel, and the entire Mets pitching lab that they have working brilliantly right now. I think that they could get the best at Castillo, who could come in this Mets rotation, pair as an ace caliber starter along with Kodai Senga. Again, an absolute worst, Castillo is your number 3, and at best, he is your ace. That is how good he is. And even with the numbers steadily starting to decline over the past couple of years, we know Castillo's on the decline still at the age of 31. We have seen it in his peripherals, but some things have held true and some things haven't changed, which I think is very important to highlight. And that includes the following, as you see there per Baseball Savant, as we go to his 2024 season. 86th percentile in pitching run value, 93rd percentile in fastball run value, 82nd in breaking run value, but 8th percentile in off-speed run value there. That goes directly in hand with him not utilizing his changeup nearly as much. Around league average and expected ERA, a little behind on the expected batting average. 76th percentile in fastball velocity, like Frankie Montas, because they both throw 95, 96, and then some on the average. Average exit velocity did give up some hard exit velo we saw last season. Chase percentage, 76th percentile, so he's still getting guys to bite at a great rate there. Whip percentage just above league average. K percentage just above league average. 73rd percentile walk percentage. So again, discipline with his strike zone, which is huge. Barrel hard hit percentage, both down this past season. Something to make note of. When Castillo does get hit, he does get hit hard. That is something to obviously not be foreign from learning about. The ground ball percentage just below league average. Something that I think would bode well with Francisco Lindor and everyone else in company when that happens. Zero extension for a guy at 6'2", 200. Not a lot of extension, but a lot of movement there. And honestly, a lot of life with that fastball and that slider sinker mix. I really think that 1-2-3 punch could be beautiful for this Mets rotation. And honestly, to home back in with that changeup. That changeup was one of the best changeups in Major League Baseball up until his tenure with the Cincinnati Reds ended. As he entered the fold there in the rotation with the Seattle Mariners and their great pitching lab in their own right with a lot of great in-house talent, thanks to their great drafting and player development over the years, they have changed the arsenal there for Luis Castillo, and he has still been having a strong success rate, but we know in the case of of Castillo, who throughout his career has been a workhorse, has been able to eat the innings at a respectable rate. Again, 175 this past season, a 3.9 expected ERA. I will say that is the highest expected ERA he has had in his career since 2018, so that's where you start to see a little bit of the decline. Last season, a 3.3 ERA, but a 3.8 expected ERA, so again, had some luck on his side with the defense around him. A 10K per 9 to a 2.5 walks per 9. This season, right around a 9K per 9 to a 2.4 walks per 9. In 2022, where he threw 150 innings, a 10K per 9 to a 2.6 walks per 9, a 2.99 ERA, a 3.3 expected ERA. Castillo, throughout his career, we have seen steadily pitch at least 150 to 170 innings each of the last 4 seasons, and in 5 of the last 6 seasons, Luis Castillo has pitched at least 150 plus innings, excluding the 70 innings where he was maxed out in the shortened 2020 campaign. So Castillo, what I love about him, he has been a workhorse. He has been able to churn out consistent innings each and every year. What I like, he's a guy that can be more than certainly a 5 and dive, can give you a lot of quality outings of 6, 7, maybe even 8 inning outings when he's really dominant and as best. In a ballpark that's very pitcher friendly in Citi Field for half the season, that's only going to further bode well for the Mets in trying to land Castillo and actually the potential of him blossoming here for the next 2-3 years for the remainder of that contract at minimum. And that contract is very appealing for the Mets because let's be frank, in comparison to as much as we like Sean Manaea, most Mets fans are in favor of Luis Castillo and the upside based on the age as well and what he has done track record-wise throughout his career versus Manaea, the Samoan southpaw who we love, hasn't had as steady of a track record where you know for certain he can, replicate what he did this past season, changing that arm slot angle and having the great Chris Sale-esque success that we saw there with Sean Manaea. In the case of Castillo, he's more of a certainty in what you're getting, at least with the floor, and certainly the ceiling, again, can exceed anyone in this rotation when he is at his best. But in the case of Castillo and the Mets, what is it going to take for someone like him? That is a big question. That's probably what you're wondering. Well, what the Mariners want, they want MLB-ready talent, similar to the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes there with the Chicago White Sox, which the Mets were heavily involved with. Funny enough, in our top 5 Mets trade target video that we did over this past month or so, Jesus Luzardo, who's in the video, is on the cusp of being traded to the Chicago Cubs, barring changes. I would love Luzardo as well. That's a separate discussion. Littell, who's in that discussion from the Rays, is the only one who hasn't been in a lot of trade talks this offseason. Devin Williams is in there. He's already a New York Yankee. Garrett Crochet's in there. He's already a Boston Red Sox. Luis Castillo's in there. Is he going to be a New York Met? At least one of these players over the past couple years we have hit on, as well as Jesse Winker, going back to the trade deadline when we did a video on targets then. The Mets landed Winker. Can Castillo be that X factor, that lone player that they land from the video? I hope so, because Luis Castillo is going to cost you a decent amount, no question. And because they want MLB-ready talent, expect the Mets to have to give up a Luis Angel Acuna type talent. I know that's going to be upsetting to hear everybody, but you have to realize the Mariners are not trying to penny pinch in this situation the way that you might initially assume. They're not looking for a salary dump. So don't come in here thinking, oh, Wardy, if we eat the entire contract, that means we're not going to have to give up much. No. The Mariners are in a win-now stage. What makes you think that they would trade at still an ace caliber level, a starter in Luis Castillo for a salary dump reason? It isn't going to happen. If you're going to acquire him, you're going to have to give up talent still, because the contract right now, it's favorable. You can argue that's one of the more bargain contracts in Major League Baseball for starters right now, given how expensive the market has inflated over the past couple years. So Castillo, 25 mil AAV, entering his age 31-32 season for the next 3 years is still not a bad bargain at all. So you're going to have to give up a guy in Acuna who could slot in right away as potentially their second baseman as soon as this upcoming season. They're looking for MLB-ready talent. Brett Beatty is right in that mix as well. But how appealing is Beatty in a Castillo deal? He is not going to move the needle. A guy like Luis Angel Acuna, however, can move the needle. To a lesser degree, Jet Williams, should they have the interest level, could move the needle, but Jet also isn't as MLB ready right now as Luis Angel Acuna is, so I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if Dipoto is a little bit stubborn and saying, hey, we want to make sure that we're landing the most MLB ready caliber guy to impact our team positively right now. I do think that is Luis Angel Acuna. Roddy Mauricio, now back in baseball activities, he's a guy that you could argue is maybe even more MLB ready than anyone outside of Acuna there, but how is he going to look come spring training? How is his projection upward there, getting back from his injury, gonna hold? That's a great question. I understand, Mets fans, you don't want to give up young, exciting talent, especially Acuna, who we would love to see do nothing more than dominate with the Mets, going toe-to-toe with his older brother Ronald for the years going forward. In the NL East. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that is why this may come as a surprise to some of you. I'm actually more against trading a guy in Luis Angel Acuna, even in a trade for Luis Castillo, and here's why. I think the Mets do still have enough assets outside of Acuna to get a deal done that'll be more comfortable for them, whereas Acuna is right on the cusp of potentially being the Mets' second baseman throughout stretches of the 2025 season, especially if they decide to trade Jeff McNeil at any point. Even if they bring back Jose Iglesias, I see Iglesias as being a guy that has a lesser role throughout the year, more that veteran leader, that veteran mentor for a Luis Angel, for a Jet Williams, for a Ronnie Mauricio, you name it, you can never go wrong there. So the Mets have some uncertainty at second base as we head in the future, and they have a lot of in-house options to consider. Luis Angel Acuna deserves the right to be given a further opportunity, and the Mets can try to swing a trade without giving up Castillo. I say do it, because I think that there is still enough there between Manaea, Buehler, Pivetta, and some other trade options to say, hey, we don't have to give up Acuna, and we can still come out happy with how our rotation is looking heading into 2025. I was all aboard trading Acuna in a deal proposed for, say, Garrett Crochet, because he's 25 with multiple years of control still, and you could potentially have him for the next decade as a dominant southpaw in this rotation, just getting his MLB career started. I would like to separate that thought from the case of Castillo, in which with Castillo, there is a steady decline that we have seen. We know he's not getting any younger, and we know that there's a lot of upside with Luis Angel Acuna. You have to give to get. Am I going to be crying a big time if the Mets lose Acuna but land Castillo? No. I'll still be very excited and happy about the deal, but if the Mets can try to swing something without having Luis Angel involved, that would be the best route for them in their future, my humble opinion. But we'll find out. Pitching's expensive. We know how good Luis Castillo is, and we also know that if you land Castillo, that further implements the Mets' chances of being a World Series contender right away in 2025 to pair with fellow countrymen and Frankie Montas, Juan Soto, and everyone else in company. I'm not going to lie, as a Mets fan, I thought that we would be treading more in a Puerto Rican wave than anything else, especially after we landed Javi Baez a couple years ago, but that was short-lived. I love all my Puerto Rican players, headlined by Francisco Lindor, but I'm telling you guys, we're inevitably getting a wave of Dominican descent here in Flushing, Queens with these players, and that's okay. That's exciting because, again, that type of familiarity, the type of vibes that they bring, it's not literally every single time, every single day of the week. It's usually a very exciting and entertaining thing to be a part of. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for the Mets' future and what they do this offseason. I know you guys are too. So let me know in the comments down below, how do you guys feel about the case of Luis Castillo? Are you for or against him? Do you like the appealing aspects of him in a trade, even if it means that you have to give up a guy and Luis Angel Acuna? Do you think the Mets can certainly do better elsewhere? Because bear in mind, they're competing to an extent with the Orioles and other teams that have deeper farms than what the Mets can currently provide. How much of an overpay may it take to pry Castillo away, especially out of the Mariners? But do the Mets have an advantage over some AL teams and the Orioles, especially even with a deeper farm, because maybe the Mariners want to make sure that he's traded out of the American League? That's a potential too. When we look at a guy like Kyle Tucker just being traded from the Astros to the Cubs, that could be indicative of how more moves will happen from American League teams there to then National League. But that'll do it for your guy, Wardy, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Luis Castillo, pros, cons, everything in between. And this is your guy, Wardy, signing out. I'll see you all in the next one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.